So if you say it's a myth, then you're ignoring history. And if you say it's straight history, then you're ignoring how literature works. And as an English major, that really makes me kind of mad. But,
I would also say, at least in that regard, I'd say Catholicism is pretty far ahead of fundamentalism as well. Taking I don't want to say necessarily an open-minded look at Scripture, but recognizing that truth just is what it is, and I guess there's nothing to fear from truth. Most of the Christians in my life, like immediate family especially, they believe like evolution is just a giant conspiracy, and the entire universe is only 6,000 years old, and the creation was literally 7 days, and the flood was like a literal event, and things like that. Like they take all of it basically literally at face value.
So, I mean, a Catholic priest is the one who theorized the Big Bang. So we sort of have that going for us. And also in general, just what I like to bring, because I know, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but like atheists I talk to, one of the fallacy they tend to is that science is atheisms. Like atheism owns science and religion has contributed nothing to it.
Definitely true. I wouldn't say that religion itself has contributed to
Not
it, but
religious in itself, but
most
religious minds.
scientists, or definitely a large portion of like the most elite scientists through history, have been not only religious but Christian. So I
Yes.
definitely give you that.
So yeah.
Truth is
So
truth regardless of where it comes from. Even bad people can come up with good points, but atheism definitely doesn't have a monopoly on science.
yes.
Like
That's a point that I like to bring up. And even with, so this is more Catholicism in general. This is not really something that Protestants like to hear, but like in regards to truth, there are not like official teachings, but there are, saints who have taught that, yes, other religions and so like all truth is from God, meaning that you can even like look at religions and dive deep into other religions, and you can find, because a lie cannot stand on its own. It has to be founded on some sort of truth. So looking at us, I like studying religions, other religions, and you can deep dive, see, wow, this is actually a very good point that sort of permeates throughout history that great philosophical minds have come to. It's a truth from God. It's also revealed in the Bible. And we can't just disregard a whole way of thinking or a whole religion just because you perceive it to be entirely false, which is an impossibility. Nothing can be an entire falsehood. It has to be grounded in some truth, or it just completely and utterly devolves into incoherency. And that, for the church, the reason we do that is that that's the path to evangelization. You got to start somewhere. And if it's not in truth, and in a truth that we share, then you're not really going to come off as a person who cares, or as a person who really actually wants the best for the other person. All you're coming off as is like you're superior to them, instead of saying, hey, we can arrive at truths. Yes, there is a little bit of like a belief in us that we have more truth than you, but like we're going to try our best to not come off as prideful, as arrogant, and just meet somewhere and then walk hopefully towards the same place. Obviously, there's a bit of an agenda for the Christian faith. We want everybody walking towards God, but
I get that. Well, I'll take this like maybe a step further as well. Do you think that there's anything in the Bible that is untrue?
Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, so I touched on biblical inerrancy earlier. Basically, all scripture is God-breathed. God being, I don't know if you believe in a tri-omni God the way that Christian fundamentalists would, but they believe that he's all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving, where he wouldn't have anything that's untrue in the Bible. I'm probably going to use my parents as an example pretty frequently because they're kind of the biggest frame of reference I have for typical fundamentalist Protestant Christians. But their interpretation of scripture is everything is not everything is literal, but everything is definitely like true. And if something seems to be untrue, you're just interpreting it wrong. But do you hold to the framework that there's nothing in the Bible that is factually untrue, like a claim that it makes it that is just like the opposite of what's true, or I guess something adjacent to that?
Um, I think there's a lot of room because on the one hand, the answer is yes, there is nothing that's untrue in the Bible, but we're when we start talking about facts, we're looking really into an empirical study of the observable.
Well, how
So
about instead of untrue, what about contradictions? I mean, that might be a better way to put it.
yes, so that is yes a better way to put it, and I'd have to also say no to that, even though there are I would put to just narrative, like the style, different styles within the Bible and how it's written. I think ultimately there's nothing contradictory in the Bible.
Okay. One of the things I've brought up before to other people I talk to is the two different accounts of Judas betraying Jesus. There's one account, I think it's in Matthew, but it might be in a different one of the four. And then there's another one in Acts where the accounts of what he did with the money, who he paid, and how he died, where the accounts are just different. Like in one account, he falls headlong into the ground, his body burst open, and his entrails still out. And then in the other one, he throws the money at the feet of the priests, and he goes and hangs himself, and then the priest by the field. I might have gotten those details mixed up, but it's two different accounts, and I can look those up here for a bit here as well. But to me, from the outside looking in now, uh, I would look at something like that as a contradiction, or at the very least, if you could find a way to, I use a term like an apologetic to kind of make them work in some really unlikely convoluted way. To me, something like that really just honestly looks like two different accounts here. All right, so the account in Matthew 27 it says Judas threw down the pieces of silver in the temple. He departed and he went and hanged himself. The chief priest, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It's not lawful for them to put in the treasury, since they are blood money." They took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. So in this account, it was Judas throwing the money at the feet of the priests, going and hanging himself, and the priests later go by and purchase the field. We say that's a pretty accurate interpretation of what's happened there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving over to Acts 1:18. It says, "Now this man bought a field with the reward of his wickedness, and falling headlong he burst into the middle, and his bowels gushed out. And it became known to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. The field was called the language in their language, whatever that is the field of blood." So in this account, it's saying that it was Judas that bought the field, and rather than hanging himself, he fell headlong into the ground and his body burst open. To me, this looks like two different accounts, or two different sequences of events. I talked to my parents about this, and the apologetic my mom came up with was, well, because it was the priest that bought the field, but because they bought it on his behalf, that could also be read as him buying the field, which that by itself doesn't make sense, or at least not to me. But then you have him, in one account, he falls headlong into the ground and he bursts open, makes a mess or whatever. But in the other account, he goes and hangs himself. And the apologetic for that is, well, maybe he went and hanged himself, and the rope broke and he fell forward and he twisted in midair and he hit the ground head first, and then his body burst open. But one account doesn't mention the hanging, and the other account doesn't mention his body bursting open, and then neither account mentions a rope breaking. Then one account says that Judas bought the field, and the other account says that it was the priest that bought the field. So to me, at least, that seems like a contradiction to me.